So if we keep that into account, then it's totally different. But for you, Miss Batavia, it's completely different. Like you absolutely can have a 40-degree day night and a 50-degree day, right?
And overcast.
And overcast. And that is a recipe for disaster. So you want it's no different than our winter plantings when we look at it and we say, hey, it's all about the recovery time. We've talked about this before. The recovery time is everything when it comes to your plantings. So what does that mean? That means how warm does it get during the day so the plant can recover? I
Hmm.
think that these plants, and we are just mentioning tomatoes a lot, but we are not talking only about tomatoes. And we will get into ones that just kind of fall outside of it, but we're talking about,
Sure.
nightshades and stuff like that. I think they can absolutely, 36 degrees is just fine. It's how
Hmm.
long are you at 36 degrees? How does that work? Like when it comes down to it and you start breaking it down, are you at 36 degrees at 10 o'clock at night all the way until 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning? Well, that's maybe an issue. Or are you at 36 degrees for an hour? And then it starts, as soon as the sun comes up, it starts to warm up. Like, how fast are you warming up? Which brings into the discussion of low tunnels. But we're going to shelf that because that's just kind of throws the whole conversation out of whack. You know what I mean?
So I rarely speak in absolutes, but I never want my tomato plants to be outside newly planted at 36 degrees Fahrenheit. I never want to put myself in that position. If I find that my tomato plants have been out at 50, 60, 70 degrees for 3 weeks and we have some kind of random complete drop, then that is what it is, but I'm not making a plan to say we're above freezing, we're past my average last frost date, and I want to put tomatoes and peppers out and I have a, high 30s, it's going to be the low. Like that's never going to be my plan. That's where I am a bit more conservative in the garden.
I just put a tomato plant in the greenhouse. You know how I just tested out, even though I don't have hopes for it at all doing anything.
Mhm.
But when I planted it, I was thinking about it and I was like, well, I don't want to dig down really deep. So I thought to myself, well, let me plant it sideways. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to see how long it would take that plant to, how the stem will bend up. I wanted to see how long will that take because that's an indication of a couple things to me. One, it's an indication of the resiliency of the plant, the
Mhm.
health of the plant, and one could argue the settling of the plant getting into place, right? So I did that and it got kind of chilly that night. It hasn't gotten real cold recently, but it took 2 days for that plant to perk up and start growing. So what that told me was, or it didn't really tell me anything. It put a question into my mind: is are we giving these plants enough credit, right? And I know there's a lot of people. I talk to people all the time. I've had them planted since a month before my last frost date. You'll be just fine. Well, I'm like Batavia. I don't do that. I'm pretty I spent 2 months growing these plants. I don't really want to take that chance and mess it up. So I want to be very careful. I don't want to throw it out because I don't, even though the store has them, I don't want to go into the store and purchase them. I want to plant what I grew for my purposes. So I'm very careful about it. But at the same time, I'm looking at these plants and I'm saying, hey, this plant's getting root bound. It needs to get
Yeah.
out of here. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? Because a plant getting overly root bound can be just as damaging, if not more damaging, than putting it out into, cooler temperatures, not frost, but 36, 38 degrees. It can do almost the same effect as far as like stunting it and messing it up. So that's why we went ahead and said, hey, you know what? We've got to go ahead and start planting. Like they're getting unruly. We're having an issue. Um, I'll throw a towel over them tonight for a little bit extra, but I'm not going to pull them in
Mhm.
because it's too much. I just can't do it.
Yeah, I think a couple of notes here. So there is some assumption that you've hardened these things off, and so if your weather is getting cooler, chances are that they may have been outside with some cooler temps anyway. So there's that. I did this through video and pictures for some years. Now I'm actually putting kind of paper to pen, so to speak, or pen to paper. Um, Documenting this and whatever that means for you becomes really important, right? The garden memory is not always true, right? Like the idea of when people say, oh, it'll just be fine, it's because they have the experience of doing it in most cases in previous years. How do you gain that experience of doing it? And then again, what you remember being true is making a note of it. So, when did these plants go out? We'll get into things like sweet potatoes versus things like squash and cucumbers and so on. So when did those things go out and how did they fare based on the temperature? I hit the bell because I continue to say, what do you gain? But something like your plants are outgrowing the area that they're holding pen. Your plants may be root bound. That is so important. I would be willing to, not 36 degrees, but willing to risk things by my view to move them from the place of on my back porch struggling to in their plant home, right? That they're going to always do better there, even with these kind of questionable temps. So if you have potentially started things a little earlier than you probably should have, you make a note of when it was started, when, kind of the growth rate, when you really felt like you had to get it into the ground, and you pay close attention, and then you make adjustments next year. Like that's a part of this. This isn't just what we're doing for this growing season. We're creating a history for ourselves.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, what happened was I was kind of, my tomatoes were struggling a little bit. So I said, hey, let me move them outside and then they
Mhm.
will get the full effect of the sunlight. And obviously it worked, but here we
Mhm.
are. And is it that big a deal? Not really. I mean, look, I'm getting them in the ground a week earlier. Big deal. You know what I mean? But at the same
What's your
time,
forecast though?
my forecast is looking pretty good. I don't know off the top of my head. It's like 70s and 80s during the day and 40s and 50s at night. So, it's
You know I still
looking.
have your weather on my app.
I know you do. That's why I'm not concerned about knowing it off the top of my head. So I go through and I look at it. And I'm like, okay, but if you are in a different situation and you're consistently getting those 36-degree nights, then that's something to be concerned about. Now, we do need to factor in, different methods like coverings and stuff like that. So, my tomatoes have been outside for a month in the greenhouse, which is basically the same thing as a low tunnel.